Hello folks, this is Tony and you're listening to the A Minute to Midnight show, which I'm bringing to you from New Zealand, but as so often is the case, my guest on the show is in America, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you will find this show today relevant. We welcome back to the A Minute to Midnight show David Rivera, and we had David on, I think it was July last year, and I thoroughly enjoyed that show. So it's really great to be chatting to you again today, David.
It's good to be here with you again, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah, we actually have some of your older ebooks on our website for free download, and there's some really great reading in those, particularly there's one about the New World Order, and we did cover that in the last show. So if anyone's interested in your older stuff, they can find them on our website. So we really thank you for that.
Sure.
I find them absolutely brilliant resources. So if our listeners want to take advantage of that, it's a great way to do it. And I believe you've recently written a new ebook.
I have, yeah. It's The Roots of the King James Bible. And I could probably thank you for that, because in our interview last year, we had started to touch base on the King James Bible and had started talking about some things in regards to that. And when I was doing all the research for my book, Final Warning, I had got into the standpoint of there being a conspiratorial aspect in regards to the war against the King James Bible because of things being changed to, I think, water down the Word of God in order to move more towards a consensus Bible that many different denominations can latch onto, that I think is going to be part of what the Bible refers to as the world church. And from that standpoint, when we were talking about it, I had basically done some peripheral research just in regards to the book, but I started to think about things back at that time that generally what a lot of King James only people do, they voice their support for the King James Bible by attacking other new versions of the Bible by looking at how different they are from the King James. And I have been guilty of that too. But I started to think, well, what about pinpointing where the King James Bible came from? You know, because if you look at some of the newer versions of the Bible, they say they are looking at the oldest and best manuscripts, which they say is Codex Sinaiticus. And there's just a lot of evidence done by Chick Publications that point to Sinaiticus being a fraudulent document, but a lot of Bible producers have latched onto that, saying that it's the best manuscript. So the thing about it is, with the King James Bible, I said, well, why don't we look back and see what the origins of the King James Bible is, so you can see what the differences are and basically the pedigree of the Bible that you have.
That's really interesting. Yes, your book, Final Warning, by the way, that you mentioned, is probably the most comprehensive book on the New World Order and the Illuminati and things that I've ever come across. And it's definitely worth people reading that if they're interested in that. When it comes to the Bible versions, this is going to be a fascinating discussion. I will say, you know, as a team at A Minute to Midnight, we're not some sort of what I call King James only cult, you know. Well, like, I do use other versions of the Bible, particularly the New King James, at times myself. I do use the King James as my kind of, I suppose, ultimate reference, and but I do find some use in some of the other versions, like the New King James version myself. So before anyone jumps on us, I'm not here to say, you know, if you don't read the King James Bible, you're reading a comic book or something, you know. I do believe in it. It's my main reference, but it's not the only version I use.
It's really funny that you talk about the New King James like that, because a couple of years ago, and I'm pretty well known in my church for being King James only. And a couple of years ago, my pastor, who uses the New King James exclusively, he came up to me. He said, "You know, Dave, you're right. There is a difference between the New King James and the King James Version that I see where they have changed things that shouldn't be changed." And he said, even though I know that, I'm still going to use the New King James because it's easier for people to understand. And, like I said, people in my church know that I'm King James only. In fact, this past Sunday, and that's why I was laughing, this past Sunday, the assistant pastor was preaching, and she's standing up front, and she's reading the text, and she said, "I'll be reading out of the New King James," and then she looks over at me. I jokingly told her, I said, "Well, I'm leaving then." But the thing about it is, it probably, what it could be equated to. I drive a Chevy right now, and I buy Chevys because when I was growing up, my mom had a Chevy.
Yeah, you've got me hooked because I'm a Chev fan as well, and we grew up with one too. So.
Right. Well, I mean, we had Chevys when I was young, so when I got older, I bought Chevys. So when I was 8 years old, my mom bought me my first King James Bible. It was a Cambridge Bible, and that's what I basically grew up reading. I went to a King James only church. We only used King James. So I knew I was able to read pretty early. I was, and basically couldn't afford to do anything else because I was raised by a single mother. So I read, and I got very interested in Bible prophecy at that age. So I really concentrated on Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation. And, and back at that time, the congregation would read the scripture. Well, you can't do that anymore because at any given time, you might have 10 different Bibles in a church. So you can't do that anymore. And the Bible says that God's not the author of confusion. So that's one of the things that, as a King James only advocate, that we talk about. But it's confusing having so many different Bibles, and God is not for confusion. So again, I use the King James because that's what I started out doing. And when my kids were younger, I gave them King James Bibles. And, so it's kind of, there's a lot to be said for, I guess, what they call the pure text is the Cambridge Bible. And there's a lot of people that talk about how that's the text that should be used over the Oxford. And the King James Bible has a very storied history as far as the origin of it. And with the King James Bible, you can actually go, basically takes you back to the Reformers. And the Reformers who were rebelling against the Catholic Church and the authority of the Catholic Church, and their Bible, and the thing about that is today, where the new versions are taking their text from what they say is the oldest and best, they're Catholic documents. So here in the past, the Catholic Church would destroy Protestant Bibles. And today, their Catholic Bible says that you're supposed to stay away from the King James Bible. Yet, we take our new Bible versions from Catholic texts. So it kind of doesn't make any sense why we would do that. And with the new King James Bible, when that was first brought on the market, it was basically sold that it was a Bible that was going to just take out the these and thous and change some of the antiquated words so it could be better understood. But unfortunately, it went far beyond that. Now, there are Bibles out there that do that, like the Sword Bible is a good Bible because it takes out and changes those words, yet still retains the text and the context of the King James Bible. But with the other versions, they've gone far beyond, just changing the language to make it easier to understand. And that's what I began looking at, the origins of the King James Bible. And that way you can equate it with where the newer Bibles are coming from today by comparing where the King James came from in the past. And you can trace the King James Bible clear back to basically almost the original manuscripts, because back at that time, obviously they were copied by hand, and it would take a lot of time to copy books. And it was basically the Gospels that were first being transported around, and the original texts were being brought into Europe by the original missionaries from the places where the manuscripts were being copied. And from that point, then they were being translated into Old Latin. And once they started being translated into Old Latin, then they started being translated into the Anglo-Saxon language. And once they started being able to be transferred there, and the books and the content began to grow further and further, to expand into more of what we know to be the Bible. But the original inception was basically just groups of books that were being collected together before it was able to be compiled into something that we perceive to be the Bible today. And one of the problems is when you look at the Catholic Church. Now, I won't say I'm anti-Catholic, but I did a lot of research into the pagan background of the Catholic Church. And the thing about the Catholic Church is that they are, because they're, they have Vatican City, they have a Pope, they have a whole worldwide organization, they have schools, and they have a very high level of scholarship and researchers and stuff like that. And I remember it was a couple of years ago, I went to, I was doing some video work on the side, and I was videotaping a wedding, and I had to go to a Catholic church to videotape that part of we were videotaping the whole day, but the ceremony was at a Catholic church. And it was the very first time I had been in a Catholic church. And when I went in, it was a magnificent sanctuary. I was in awe just of the magnificence of it all. And so there's this picture that people have of the glory of the Catholic Church because of the gigantic churches and just the organization. And they have some very a lot of scholars that are trained to the nth degree in research, and they have archives at the Vatican where they have documents thousands of years old, and so they're very respected as far as their scholarship in regard to the Bible. So when you talk about the Codex Vaticanus, the Catholic Church has, and is in such good condition that a lot of people believe that's not a real document, that could be a forged document. But a lot of people perceive, just because the Catholic Church advocates for something, that it's the real deal. And that's the thing why the Catholic Bible, Jerome was the one who basically put it together. And Jerome was criticized because of he made his own translation. And he took it. He changed a lot of things that were in the old Latin, and that is where. And basically, he was charged by the Pope to put this Bible together, and it was to be a Catholic Bible. So he was a scholar in every sense of the word, very respected for the skills that he had in translation, but there was an agenda there. And that was a thing that was starting to come into play when you looked at the degrees of the King James Bible. The verse in Psalms that King James people latch onto is Psalms 12:6-7. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. And a lot of people believe this refers to the evolution of the King James Bible through the various translations of the William Tyndale's New Testament, the Miles Coverdale Bible, 1535, the Matthew's Bible in 1537, the Great Bible in 1539, the Geneva Bible in 1560, the Bishop's Bible in 1568, and the King James Bible in 1611. Now, I have a chart in the back of the book that that shows actually the relationship between all these different versions, because each version kind of built on itself for the next version. And the thing about what was happening there, everyone who worked on that particular Bible would refer to the Catholic Bible, because there was just a degree of scholarship that they felt that there had to be something there that they could refer to when they were perhaps getting stuck on the old Latin documents. And like Tyndale was accused of using the Catholic Bible, but he said that he didn't. But there are certain passages that would be in his translation that they would say, no, this came out of the Catholic Bible. And but the thing about it is, in looking at the early translators, if those early translators were reformers and they were part of the Reformation movement, then they were anti-Catholic and they were against the Catholic Bible and did not want a translation that reflected what was in the Catholic Bible. So, and that's where we follow the pedigree of the movement towards what actually became the King James Bible. And I think there had to be a King James Bible. I think that the advent of the King James Bible was a perfect literary storm, because it just came that the people who were on the King James Committee were that really it was the most scholarly group of men that have ever come together to work on a Bible. And you have people that, and I go into the book, I go into the various people who were on the different committees, and you have people that were so trained in foreign languages that they, even though they might have been English, they grew up from a young age reading Greek and Hebrew and speaking Greek and Hebrew, to the point that sometimes they were uncomfortable speaking English. So you had people that lived these foreign languages, and then we don't really know what original documents they had access to at that time. And the earliest translator for where the King James Bible stems from was Erasmus, and Erasmus had he was anti-Catholic. Basically came up through the Catholic Church and then left the Catholic Church because of various abuses within the church, and was very much against their doctrine, very much against the Pope. And so those translators were the ones that were going to ensure that what was seen as the true word of God was going to live on and transcend all the different Bible versions that were being passed around. There was a lot of different translations back at that time, and that's why you have to be very careful of the origin of the various manuscripts that were being pulled together. And the King James Committee, they pulled a lot of documentation together and looked at a lot of things. And a lot of people say that Erasmus did not have the Catholic Bible to be able to refer to, but he actually did have access to it and did not want to use it. But of course, there's a lot of people that talk about how there were things that Erasmus didn't originally put in his first translation because he felt that it wasn't part of the original manuscripts. And then though it came in later, there is a lot of people that still question whether he was being authentic in what he was doing with his translations. But the thing is that the King James Bible has a pedigree that goes, I feel goes back, has a connected chain of evidence that goes back to the original manuscripts, whereas you can't do that with Sinaiticus or Vaticanus. And there's a lot of people that believe that those were the products of Bibles who were ordered by the the early Catholic Church. And I think there was, and I forget who it was, but there was like 50 Bibles that were ordered to be commissioned to be made. And a lot of people believe that Sinaiticus and Vaticanus were part of those original 50 Bibles. And the newer Bible versions, they use Sinaiticus, and where Sinaiticus is missing pieces, then they use Vaticanus to fill in those gaps.
Well, I've got a couple of questions on this. One, the King James Bible, that what manuscript did they use? And then also, could there not also have been an agenda there because were they not hired by King James? And, you know, if they would have wanted to make sure that they translated things in a way that wouldn't upset the king as well. Is that a possibility?
Well, and that's been the accusations that was made, that King James did not like the notes that were put in the Geneva Bible by the Reformers, and he had said that was one of the worst Bibles he had ever read, and he wanted the King James Bible not to have any of those kinds of notes. And when the rules were given to the King James Committee, that was part of it, that there was not to be any notes in the Bible. Because, and basically that's the same as a study Bible today. A lot of people stay away from study Bibles because the notes reflect the doctrine of the person who wrote the study notes. So that's kind of the same thing. And there were accusations made, and I can't remember the verse. That there was one particular verse that was basically initially translated by the Geneva Bible to be against the king. And so King James, I guess, made sure that was taken out and the wordage changed, that it wasn't attacking the king. So I mean, there's that to be said for that aspect of it. But the thing about it is, when you look at the words that were changed, the words that were changed did not really change the context of the verse. The word changed, but the context really didn't change. So it's kind of a moot argument in regards to that. And as far as what manuscript it originally came from, again, the original signatures from the missionaries, going from being translated from the original Greek into the Old Latin, into Anglo-Saxon, and into Norman English, or Norman, and I forget, the Anglo-Norman. And there was a combination there that for a short period that went through after Anglo-Saxon was no longer being spoken, and then eventually into the English. And the names are escaping me right now, but there was an early Bible that was before the Tyndale version, and that particular Bible was kind of, a lot of people kind of attack it. It was the John Wycliffe Bible.
Yeah,
and that was kind of, and of course the Catholic Bible was the Latin Vulgate, is what the Catholic Bible is. But the John Wycliffe Bible was, a lot of people don't really particularly believe that belongs to the line of translation as far as the King James Bible, because that particular Bible was attacked for containing some of the Latin Vulgate. And I've done a lot of research, and what I like to do, I like to look at a lot of different sources and not just a couple sources. And all the sources are kind of split as to whether they believe that the Latin Vulgate was used. It wasn't primarily used, but a lot of people believe that it was used as a sort of a secondary source. And the thing about that is that was part of, I think, the reason for that you had to have a King James Bible, because the Latin Vulgate Bible was very influential in what it represented. And even though it may not have been used by later versions, it was still referred to. People still looked at it as a reference source because of the scholarship that was behind it.
The King James, like I say, I do go to that ultimately, generally, but there's still a few translations of words in there that to me aren't really right. Like the words, for instance, in Matthew 5:26 it uses the word farthing, and in Revelation 6:6 it uses the word penny. You know, the wheat and the barley will be quarts of wheat for a penny or whatever, which is very old English language. They didn't have farthings and pennies in the days that the apostles lived and Jesus lived, and even the word penny, to say, you know, a quart of wheat for a penny, I can't remember the exact measurement, or 3/4 of wheat or whatever it is.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not accurate. It makes it sound like, oh, well, gosh, you can buy masses of it for just a penny, you know? And whereas, of course, at the time, a penny was worth a lot more, but that can throw you, because I don't believe it should have ever been probably translated as penny or farthing in the other one, when they were never actually used in the time. So,
well, I guess the thing about it is, you know, you have to look at it in the context that the Bible says you're not supposed to change anything, and it's just like you know, how in the Old Testament it talks about that you're not supposed to get any marks on your body. And a lot of people, Christians, justify that by saying that verse and saying, well, because of that, you're not supposed to get any tattoos. So it's a sin if you get a tattoo. But the whole idea was, I believe, with that, you have to take it in context. And I believe that sometime in the end times, at some period, I think there's going to be a mark that is going to be put on people, whether it is a chip or anything like that, that is going to make you part of the system. So that's what this verse, I think, is reflecting upon. If you don't get any marks put on your body, then you'll be sure not to have anything like that and be made part of anything like that unwillingly. So you have to take things in context, and see, that's why the Bible, you're not supposed to change anything in the Bible. You know, it's because people want to change things and take it out of context. So I think that's why you're not supposed to change anything. That way, man can't get his fingers mixed up in it.
But then isn't penny and farthing changing it? Because, you know, like I say, they didn't. There's no way that the Apostle John would have used the word penny, because they didn't have pennies; they had denarius.
You know, I understand that. And, you know, I just believe in what the Bible says, that you're not supposed to change anything. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, where do you stop updating? If you update that, where do you stop? I mean, you just can't stop. You'll just keep on updating other things. And so the best thing to do is not change anything. That way you don't have to worry about something being changed that's not supposed to change. And I think still, you know, in a lot of different Bibles, they put notes in those areas to explain what that is, so you can read it in the context that you need to understand it.
Yeah, because, for instance, that verse in Revelation 6:6, where it talks about a denarius in most versions rather than a penny, a lot of them will have a line, a note that says basically it was a day's wages. So,
right.
You know, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, which means it's going to be extremely expensive. Whereas if you look at a quart of wheat for a penny in today's language, you'd think, oh, gosh, I'll be able to buy heaps of wheat really easily. You know, right. Yeah. Anyway, so that's probably one of the places that I kind of have a few question marks with the King James myself, and you know, and yet overall I would trust it far more than any of the other English versions. But I'm not so sold into it that I wouldn't look into another version to go, well, actually, what does that version say? And then going back to the Strong's Concordances, which is, of course, based around the King James, is a great place to go as well. So we also have today, people saying that, you know, this whole Mandela effect, that the King James Bible is being changed and that the word penny was never in there, and that's been changed because of CERN and all of this, I think, nonsense. What do you think on that?
Well, you had brought that up the last time we had talked. And since then, I've watched a lot of videos, I've read a lot of things, and I've seen a couple websites where they give lists of words that they say were not originally in the Bible. And like I said, I've been reading the Bible since I was 8 years old, and a lot of those words I recognized as being in there. And I think what it is that people are going in and reading these words, having not read the Bible before, and thinking, well, why are these words in there? And I think it's more having to do with that. But most of the words that and of course, I didn't read the whole Bible at that age, but of what I did read, and I remember, because there's certain words that I remember joking around with my friends at church at the time about those words being in there. And you can, kind of salty language that you wouldn't think would be in the Bible. And people are seeing that now, and they're saying, well, how can that be in the Bible? Well, no, it was in the Bible because we joked about that as kids.
Yeah. Like you were talking about ones like pisseth against the wall and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember also I hear people say that wine bottles was never in there. It was always wineskins. And yeah, I distinctly remember it being as wine bottles, and the first time I heard wineskins, I thought, I haven't heard that expression before. So to me, I can go way back and think, yeah, wine bottles was always that translation. So yeah. I think it's a deception and a psyop, this whole Mandela effect, because if you can't trust God to be able to maintain his word and stop a Bible being altered, then where does this stop, the whole thing?
Well, the thing to even for people to not believe that there was a Noah's Ark or a big boat with animals in it, they can't believe that, but they can believe that somebody went back into time to change the Bible, and I guess from the consensus of what I've read, a lot of people believe that it's CERN that has done this. And I just find it hard to believe that people can even think that time travel is going on. And I know this year on television, there was a couple shows that dealt with time travel, which was kind of interesting with the Mandela Effect really becoming popular. And I'm really starting to see more and more websites having to do and people swearing that it's real. But I can tell you from reading, because right now I'm 60 years old, so we're talking 50 years I've been reading the Bible, and believe me, a lot of those words were already in the Bible. One of the biggest ones is the Matrix. The Matrix, that word is in the Bible.
Yeah.
And believe me, it's been in the Bible. So
yeah, and the thing is, even say hypothetically, if there was time travel and they did manage to go back and change the King James Bible, they would have had to gone back and changed every single reference to the King James Bible. They would have had to gone back and changed Webster's dictionary. They would have had to go back and change Strong's concordance. They would have had to gone back. My gosh, they would have spent years just changing every single thing and every single picture everyone had put out. It's just nonsense as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Yeah. Because I have a commentary from back in the 1800s, and nothing was changed in that. I mean, that's reflecting what is in the Bible, and I just think it's kind of it kind of is having people having less faith in the Bible that they have, and I mean that's food. That's our food as Christians. And so when they can take the attention off of that and say, well, how can you trust that because it's been changed? I just think people are doubting now what's in their Bible because they're starting to think that it was changed, and it wasn't changed. And again, it goes back to what I said about the agenda, I believe, that's going on to water down the Bible. I mean, you look at how many major Bible translations there are, and there's a lot of them. And the thing about it is, there are, other than the King James Bible. Now I know they said about people were saying about, and I guess in England it's protected by copyright, but here in the United States, we can freely use it. And I've actually wanted to contact the publisher over there just to get some clarification on that. But in other Bible versions, you just can't use those, because you have to get their permission. So that's part of new Bible versions. It's money. These publishers having to do something to stay in business. And I always look at Bibles, and my wife gets mad because she says I have too many Bibles. I have about 40 Bibles. And I don't know if you remember that movie with Mel Gibson where he always had, it's where he was and I forget the name of it. conspiracy story or conspiracy something. But every time he had to go into a store and buy a copy of Catcher in the Rye because he was brainwashed to do that, and then they were able to track him. And that's the same way with me. A lot of times, I don't get to go to a bookstore very often, but a lot of times I do. I buy a Bible. And just a couple of days ago, I bought a Bible because it has a zipper on it, and I can keep it in my briefcase. So my wife, she just looked at me and shook her head and said, "Oh, you bought another Bible? That's good." But the thing about it is I think the Bible is being changed to have it watered down, to be something that's less powerful than what the Bible was meant to be. When Jesus used, his words were used to cast out demons and to heal the sick. And if you change those words, it changes the power of what Jesus represented. And like I said, I believe, I tell you, years ago, I wasn't conspiratorial minded. Back when I was in college, I just poo-pooed all that kind of talk. But after doing research and see what the elite does is that when they attack something, they don't just attack from one angle, they attack from all angles, because that is the best way to win when you control all the avenues that surround a particular thing. So this is, they're attacking the church. They need to weaken the church. They need to weaken the Bible, because if you have a weak church and a weak Bible, you have a weak Christian. And so they want weak Christians who are going to acquiesce to the New World Order, who they're going to allow, in other words, they're allowing homosexuals to serve in ministry in churches. That's a weak church. So Satan needs a weak church so he can defeat Christians, so he can control Christians. I actually, I joked with somebody on Facebook that I was going to write a book called "Can a Democrat Be a Christian and Still Go to Heaven?" And I actually wrote it, but it's not going to see the light of day. I have it filed away. But if you look, and there are a lot of, especially in the South in the United States, there is a lot of pastors and a lot of Christians Southern Baptists who are Democrat. And I went through step by step. And if you take, like, say, if somebody saw me at a KKK meeting, a Ku Klux Klan meeting, they would say, "Oh, he's a racist," and this and that. So what happens? You're identified with something just because of a particular behavior when you may not be a racist. Okay, or let's say when I used to do a lot of research into the occult, and let's say somebody said, "Well, you have books about Satanism in your library," and I said, "Well, yeah, I do research." Well, somebody else would say, "No, well, you're probably a Satanist." So that's the same thing with if you look at Democrats. If you're a Democrat, do you believe that babies should be murdered? Do you believe that same-sex marriage is okay? And there's other things that if you're a Democrat, you're identifying with that. So and I started out as a Democrat. I changed to Republican. Now I'm an independent. And that's the thing. If you don't want to be seen as somebody who advocates these things, then you shouldn't be labeled as a Democrat. Because to me, you are. It's the image you projected, because you're labeling yourself as a Democrat, and you're saying, "I believe in the principles and the platform of the party," and that's basically what my little journal was. That won't. I told my wife, I said, "After I die, you can do something with it, but right now you can't, because it's a hot potato. If you spout things like that, it's hate speech." And that's the thing about the Bible, because of what the Bible says about homosexuality. It's being labeled as a hate book. So, and that's the thing. I believe that more and more the Bible is going to be attacked as a hate book, and they're going to say, "Well, if you use a King James Bible, you're a racist, or you're this, or you're that." So that's another thing that I believe. When I go into a bookstore, I see all these other versions. They have real nice looking Bibles and fancy leathers and this and that, but there's nothing there for King James. And if you want a nice King James Bible, you got to order from a small publisher or something like that. So, King James Bibles are taking less and less shelf space up in the bookstore.
That's
and
real
I think there's going to be less and less of a demand for the King James Bible.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, the hate speech thing is definitely, that's something that's being used and bandied around in so many areas, as long as, if you don't agree with them in any way, shape or form. But, I hear people talk about the left and the right. I'm a right wing or I'm a left wing. And I think the Hegelian dialectic and, Adam Weishaupt's original sort of plan for the whole thing. And I think if anyone is extreme on the right wing or extreme on the left wing, they're basically wings of the same bird. And that's a tool that these people use to get people at extremes at either end. And neither is really balanced. That's kind of how I see it. It really is like communism and fascism in a sense. It doesn't matter whether you call yourself a communist or a Nazi or a fascism. It's all the same thing. It's really just the same thing, like a full circle. And that's part of the whole Hegelian dialectic that they use, and then they bring their middle ground, which they want, which will ultimately be that New World Order, which kind of melds all of these things in a sense together. So, and getting rid of anything that stands in the way has always been their plan. And so Christianity, to destroy Christianity, was Albert Pike's plan, going way, way back. And I know you deal with that in your other book. And really they're trying to move us towards that. And if they can water down the Bible and get us to believe that the Bible doesn't say something that it says, and that any sort of sin is all right in the end, then it's moving us towards that sort of one world order that you were mentioning earlier.
Right, and that's the thing. And I know when I was a Democrat, and that's when I was starting to do the research and everything like that. And the Democrats were the ones that made it possible for the Federal Reserve to be passed, the income tax and all that. So the Democrats have always been seen as being kind of the bad guys, and the Republicans have always been seen as being pro-family, pro-small government. But I got news for you. There's bad people with the Republicans and the Democrats. That the elites have infiltrated basically every political movement, and that's been done on purpose because they want to control. They pit the right against the left and the left against the right. So they pit, So there's that going on. So that's why, and that's another reason why I became an independent. Because I don't want to be part. When Trump won the nomination, and they were trying to get the delegates to change their vote at the convention, I looked at that and said, well, you're trying to take away my vote. My delegate has voted for me, or is going to vote Trump because Trump won in Pennsylvania. So he's supposed to go to the convention and vote for Trump. So you're trying to say, no, we want you to vote for Cruz instead of Trump. So here you advocate taking away my vote, and I don't agree with that. So that's why I changed my party. If a party feels that ambivalent about my vote, then I don't want to be part of that political party that wants to take away my rights. So, but again, I'm a conservative. I mean, that hasn't changed. But that's different than being aligned in any one political party, because there's conservative Democrats too. So you can be a Democrat and be conservative. So that movement of the elite, and whether you want to call it the Illuminati or global governance or the deep state, or whatever you want to call it and label it, they have thoroughly infiltrated the governmental system, the public school system, and that's what they've done with the church, the emerging church. And the things that are, I watched one particular pastor who stood in front of a congregation and said that once you're saved, we don't want you at our church. You need to go to another church, because our church is about saving sinners. We want sinners coming here so we can minister to them. And if you're here, you're just going to get in the way.
Wow.
And I could not believe that. And this is the emerging church, the emergence church, and they're basically there to entertain people. I mean, some of these churches, it's almost like a rock concert, and music has become a very big part of a church service now, where it didn't used to be that way. I mean, I go to a fairly good, nice church myself, and I've been going there for years. I mean, they don't use King James Bible, but that's okay. I won't break relationship over somebody who's not using the King James Bible. But in our church, the worship service, the music part of the service, probably can go on for an hour. So that's kind of one of the new changes that are going on today in church. Whereas when I was little, 8, 9, 10 years old, we might sing for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And then the rest of the service was ministry. We have a preacher, he could preach an hour and a half. So that was the major part. But a lot of the things are changing in the church, and it all goes into like some of the and you're into music, so and you may have even heard this, where some Christian songwriters are upset because they feel like they have to use the name of Jesus in their song. So they feel upset that they feel forced to do that. And some of the music that passes for Christian music today, you can almost listen to it on secular radio and feel a different thing about it than it being a Christian song. It could almost be like a love song in certain aspects. It can play on a secular radio station. So and that is all part of people being what the Bible calls double-minded or lukewarm, and Christians are being wishy-washy, wanting to fit into the world.
Yeah.
When we weren't called to fit into the world.
I totally agree. And I mean, I'm a musician, and I've done the whole thing. I've played, secular stuff, and played in bars and concerts and whatnot. And I've played in worship teams. I've played in worship teams where they do the blacking out with the lights and all of that stuff. And I've been through that phase in the past. And I'm at the point now where I enjoy playing worship music and all that. But I'm so over the entertainment value of it. It shouldn't be. It's like I don't want to be there to entertain people. That's just not what I'm. If that's all it is, I want out. But
right.
And I listen to a lot of the lyrics, like you mentioned, and I think some of them are just nonsensical or nonsense in a way, rather than a lot of the old traditional songs or church songs and hymns and things. They had great lyrics, and I mean, yeah, some of the songs, worship songs today, do as well. But there's a lot that are just mamby-pamby language that does nothing for me. And yeah, you may as well. I mean, if you were an outsider and knew nothing about Christianity and you walked in, you'd think, what on earth are they singing about half the time? But like I say, I still enjoy playing in a worship team and things, but I also have my kind of boundaries, I suppose. Now what if something goes too far in a certain direction, it's like, nah, I don't want to do that, because I've been the full circle, done the whole, the round thing, yeah. But yes, watering down the Christian faith is kind of, I think, is a big part of the agenda, the New World Order agenda, and ultimately to get rid of it entirely. And you can look back in a lot of the old writings of Adam Weishaupt and Albert Pike and people like that, and you can see that's always been the plan, but they have to do it incrementally. You can't do it all in one step.
Exactly. And that's why it's taken so long, and that's why I believe that some of the people that's part of the elite are getting impatient. And I feel like they're probably going to try to pull something to further along, what they want to do. But I told you, like, a lot of King James only people will, and there's some out there saying that if you don't use a King James Bible, you're going to hell. I won't say that, and I don't believe that. And like I said, in our church, they don't use the King James. Well, and actually, I won't say they don't use it. They use many different versions to convey what they're preaching about. They might use King James. They might use New King James. One of the assistant pastors uses NIV. And I'll roll my eyes and go with it. But I'm not going to break relationship or fellowship with somebody just because, And I think there's and some people, and I genuinely understand that some people find it hard to be able to comprehend the Old English. And I can just read it and it flows right off my tongue because I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. And somebody else that hasn't done that, of course, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, and they want to have something. Now, one of the things that I suggest is to have a parallel Bible. And I actually have a real nice parallel Bible that came from the old PTL club years ago. They came out with it's a gigantic Bible. It has King James on one side and the Living Bible on the other side. Now that would be something nice for somebody who they have problems, sort of understanding, to have a parallel Bible to be able to supplement what they're reading. And and a lot, there's different people who have said that, like, when you start reading the Bible, that it actually increases your reading skills. So there's something to be said for that. But yeah, I'm not going to spurn somebody because they don't use a King James Bible, because more and more, fewer and fewer people are using a King James Bible. So if you go that route, you're not going to have many friends at all. So
yeah. So that's a good point. Where can people buy your new ebook, The Roots of the King James Bible? Where can they obtain that?
Okay, it's in the Kindle format that you can get on Amazon.
Okay, yep. And do you have a website?
I don't really have a website anymore. I kind of have an archive site that you have on your website, and so they can still go to that. I used to keep a regular website, and it just got to the point that I didn't have time to keep it up. So I keep this archive site where you can just go and get all my research, and it's there. It's not a real pretty place, but it's a place where you can go and get my stuff.
Yep, so that's great. And yes, you can obtain your old books like Final Warning on the A Minute to Midnight website as well. There is a link to that, and I'll leave that link in this so people can go there if they want to.
My book Final Warning is still available on paperback on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
That's good to know as well. Yes. And is that the full version?
No, that's only the first half. The full version was the one, and you can still find that if you want to pay a couple $100. But that was published in 2004, and actually at that time I kept one copy for myself, and I should have kept a couple copies, and I actually ordered one from somebody on and I forget where it was on. They were on Amazon. But when the guy found out who I was, he refused to take my money and just sent it to me free. But when I got it, it was a bootleg copy. It wasn't the real copy. So, and you could tell the difference because the bootleg copy doesn't have my picture in the back. And now the thing about it is there's a particular website out there who has my book on their website that you can read. And they have a particular background on their website that is on the back cover of that bootleg. And I got in contact with them to see if they did that. And they said they did. Now, I myself don't care. Because basically, if they're printing bootleg copies of the whole thing, I might buy some myself. See, that was never about money. I mean, I don't care about that. And I even told the publisher that I want to get that word out there. People need to see what's going on. They need to, when they look at the news, they need to see that there's Bible prophecy being fulfilled in the background here, and what this is all about and why we're going in the direction that we're going. And it's all leading to one world government. That's where it's all leading. It's leading to government control.
Yeah, and your book, Final Warning, is, I believe, probably the most comprehensive book on the subject that anyone's ever done. And yeah, and it's a great resource. So yeah, if people want to know this stuff, then it's well worth them getting a hold of a copy of either the print version or come on the A Minute to Midnight site and download the PDF version of it.
I remember when I was promoting that book. And I was dealing with a large bookstore, and I had sent them a copy of the book, And the guy said, well, I don't have time to read it now. I'm going to take it. We're going on vacation. I'm going to take it to the shore with me. So a week later, he called me back. He said, man, that's like reading a textbook. I really should have took that to the shore with me.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. It's got so much information in there. Well, actually, this has been a really fascinating discussion, David. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and we've pretty much run out of time. Have you got any last words that you'd like to share? Not last words as if I'm going to pop you off, but anything that you'd like to share before we call it quits?
Well, on my video, I have a video on my YouTube channel, and I basically sign off the video by saying that if you don't have a King James Bible, you don't have a Holy Bible.
So you have a YouTube channel that people can find you on?
Yes.
And what's that under?
Well, I mean, if you just do my name, David Allen Rivera, it'll come up.
Okay, that's
I don't do a whole lot there. I try to do, some odds and ends there. I haven't had the time. I basically just got started. I've been doing it for a couple of years, but I'm just putting different things out there. I haven't been fully, I just actually got myself a decent camera now, so I want to do more things, but I haven't gotten rolling yet. But there's some things there that, I do different Bible reviews and stuff like that.
Excellent. Well, yep, we better sign off for this show. Keep us in touch with anything new that you do, and I'm sure that this won't be the last time we have you on the show. I've really enjoyed it, so thanks for being on the A Minute to Midnight show today, David.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tony.
Folks, you can find all of our A Minute to Midnight shows on YouTube and on iTunes, and there's also an audio download available on the A Minute to Midnight website. That's aminutetomidnight.com, and you may actually want to follow or bookmark that website, because we do put up new shows and articles regularly, and probably the easiest way for you to keep track of us is to follow or bookmark the website. And also, we are donations run, and we want to thank those people that do donate via PayPal, or on our website we have a button that you can donate. So thank you to people that do that. We have a Facebook group, an A Minute to Midnight Facebook group, which you're welcome to join as well. And I write, play and record all the music in our shows, and my music, royalty-free production music and also sound effects packs are at rockshoresounds.com, and there's a link to that on the A Minute to Midnight website. Well, that's about it for today's show, folks. So this is Tony signing off until the next episode.